This video is a conversation with Vilas Swamy on SAP Source to Pay transformation. In the conversation, we will focus on the overall SAP procurement ecosystem, key products and offerings, especially looking into the Ariba side of things, challenges and opportunities, and any takeaways for SAP enthusiasts across the spectrum. Coming to Vilas, Vilas is one of the names in the SAP Source 2 space that I trust. In his 15 years of experience as a SAP practitioner, Vilas has held a variety of positions and responsibilities while driving procurement transformation. Vilas has worked in both product and service consulting companies. He has been an implementation consultant. He has led small and large teams in global SAP transformation programs. And he has been an advisor to senior executives, driving change management, adoption, and so on. In the past few years, Vilas has been building businesses in the source to pay transformation space. And currently, he is running his own firm, looking into procurement transformation with SAP capabilities. With that, hey Vilas, welcome. How is it going?
Hey, hi Dave. Good, good. How about you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Thank you for speaking with me on this. I think for disclaimer to all the people who are going to watch this, we know each other for last few years now, right? I think we got connected over LinkedIn based on the content both we have shared in the SAP procurement space, and instantly I think we had a chemistry, so to speak, because we like this space. We are working on this area. So yeah, like I said, I appreciate your knowledge and your contribution on this space. So I'm really glad that we are able to do this.
So thanks for this opportunity to share my knowledge and views on the topic that we plan to cover. Thank you.
It's great. I wanted to start with to pique your brain. How do you see the space evolving in the SAP source to pay space currently? And there are a lot of churn happening, changes. So what kind of trends that is emerging right now? Are there anything specific that we need to take note of?
Yeah, so when we talk about SAP, right, so it comes up with its legacy of proven industry-specific applications, right? If we talk about SAP ERP space, so to say, right? And then ever since, it has also acquired other tools like Ariba. Then we have Vilas, and there's so many other supporting applications, you can say, right? So many customers feel that there is a lot of choices and redundancies in terms of what they can actually pick, right, from SAP, right? So SAP, like specifically in procurement space, they have own legacy ERP modules that they cater to. Then they are coming up with new, let's say, S/4HANA sourcing and procurement solution, as well as then the top seller for them is in this space is Ariba, right? If you look at recent customer wins that they have. So this particular area, even though for any customer who's maybe using ERP for the long duration, or even if they are an organization who want to look at SAP adopting different solution it has to offer. I mean, at a very high level, it might appear that they're very redundant solutions. But if you see, there is a particular use case and there is a plan that one can look at in terms of which solution fits their need, depending
Right.
on, let's say, what stage of the current state of their state of the art technology that they are, right? So
Yeah.
depending on that, they could uniquely identify what is the best fit for them, right? So obviously, so sometimes it can happen that you're engaged with the sales team who is kind of sometimes very aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Then you can, in that case, you can take help of certain consultants who are in this space and who have worked on different platforms, as well as who can give you a customized view of what you should be going ahead with, right? In terms
Right.
of right from purchasing the license of the solution and what could be the future path, right? So whenever you're talking SAP, I think as an organization, you never think of it as a 1 year or a 2 year plan, right? So it has to, I mean, at least from the view and goal setting as to where you want to get your technology for your organization. So it should at least be like you should have a 3 to 5 years of visibility in terms of where you want to get to, right? Even
True.
though you get like you might be getting some solutions which are right kind of give you a feel of plug and play. There's still a lot of work in terms of the
Absolutely.
adoption that
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and
The
then
value
getting the readiness,
extraction
readiness. Yeah,
takes a while. Yes. So
yeah,
what you are saying is there are a lot of choices, and it's very easy to get confused, right? What to choose. So you kind of need a expert help to find out which product suits your landscape and if there are kind of right use case. Because even if you have a business case, really at the high level you can apply products like S4, Ariba, field glass, let's say, service procurement. There can be different
correct.
products. You have to really dig
Right.
deeper to find out which products works, and also you need to look at the future. I think that's what you were saying. You need to look at the future, at least 3 to 5 years, and what makes sense to bring into your technology stack, right?
Correct, correct. And then, so to give a more further perspective into how to analyze, right, which could be a better fit, and whether do you really need an additional help in terms of, apart from the sales team that you're talking to, let's say from SAP, and you might have some internal folks who understand your internal landscape, system landscape, and what is the path forward in terms of how your IT wants to take software forward, right? Licensing.
Yeah.
Basically, try and understand is there's basic difference between when you talk about the ERP side solutions which come from SAP, which evolved from, let's say, ECC to HANA,
Yeah.
versus the other modern cloud solutions, or say
Spend
not
management
really
stack.
the spend management solution, so to say,
Yeah.
and it could be Ariba, it could be Fieldglass or Concur for that matter, right?
True.
So for those, specifically talking about Ariba also provides you a large source to pay suite of solutions, right, with different
Yeah.
modules within
Absolutely.
it. But when it comes to Ariba, it's more of a event-based solution, right? So for all your processes are interlinked with an event, right? So there is an event and then there are triggers to your process flows. Okay. So that
Interesting.
necessarily is not the same when it comes to your ERP system. ERP system is, because it has been traditionally grown, right? And then there was, like, as I said, industry specific solutions were created, right? So that's not, I mean, you can still build those as event based, but when you talk about out of the box solution or the standard vanilla that you get, right? Obviously, it is a very configurable system and you can do customization and things like that. But the way it has evolved is more of a fact based solution, right? So you have facts, and the problem or the benefit and problem with facts is you can alter them, right? The facts could be altered and things. but it's not the same when it comes to event-based triggers, right? So event-based triggers are very logically interlinked, right? It's kind of a blockchain. I mean, it might not be a word to word this thing, but you can think on those lines, right? So
Got
when I
it.
say event-based
Yeah.
triggers, right? That's
No,
where these two
absolutely.
systems kind of differ.
Yeah.
So so, so if you have a very matured process in place, then your organization is already ready for all these solutions that are specifically like for spend management, then for your contingent labor, or for your travel and expenses, right? So
Yeah, and
these can
these days there are
definitely,
so many other
yeah,
things like process mining, advanced payment for suppliers. There are so many tools across the board. And yeah, I mean, when you say that event and trigger, I think it makes a lot of sense. But the ERP, it's there, right? The ERP space has been evolving last 50 years or so. Industry best practices, tax, finance, rules and regulation, lot of bureaucracy and like I said, tax and other kind of legal financial structure has been incorporated to
right,
ERP. Whereas more business specific and more, let's say, company specific use cases are probably more suited when it comes to these newer kind of products, Ariba, Conquer, Fieldglass, and so on. On that, I wanted to follow up with in the last, let's say, 5 to 7 years, because I think Ariba and these other products, the Fieldglass, even Conquer, they have really bursted into the scene in last, let's say, 8 to 10 years, right? Post 2015, so to speak. What are the key modules on Ariba side, for example, just to focus on Ariba? What are the main modules that you see companies across the board are kind of choosing? Others, particular modules which are doing well compared to some other modules. What are your thoughts?
So it really actually is more of a region specific
Okay.
differentiation when you talk about that, right? So there are different ways to look at it, right? So uh, going purely by the number of licenses that are being sold and things like that, it could give you a different picture. But I want to give you a slightly different perspective. See, so in the entire source to pay space, right? For your business, what is that key area that you're looking for, right?
Mm.
Would be your preferred thing, right? But let's say if you want to talk about for your organization, the return, maybe the stage, the financial or economical stage that you are at, right? uh, it might make sense to you to have a solution which is faster return on investments, right? So you could go for a source to contract or a sourcing solution only, right? So where, I mean, I know a client which was like we went live with sourcing in 3 days time, right? So I was doing a training of the product training to the customer, and then customer was so ready. He said, "Okay, let's do one thing. Instead of doing these test events, let's do a live event. I'll call up suppliers and get them ready." And that's the beauty of these modernized solutions, right? So the third day of the project, and then we did a live event with these suppliers, and then the first event that we conducted, the entire cost of the license as well as the implementation fee was, I mean, in that one single event, they could achieve that, right? So
Okay.
that's the kind of potential it holds. So does that mean that then sourcing is the only go-to this thing for your organization? Maybe not. Maybe, I mean, so it all depends on what your organization is currently, what stage it is, what is the level of maturity for which process you have, right? What is the relevance or where are those improvement factors? But going by the trend, right? So there are, as I said, region-wise, source to contract is quite uh, uh, acceptable in, let's say, in APAC region, more to say, right?
Okay.
Whereas, I mean, I've seen entire source to pay process being well utilized in Middle East
Middle
region,
East.
if you,
I wanted
and
to
then,
ask you about Middle East because you have
yeah, Middle
significant
East and
experience.
Europe. Yeah,
Yeah.
so Middle East and Europe, they are. And then again, US, America's market is something where they go a level beyond. Like they're not only limited to source to pay, but they want to leverage the entire business network and go to a point where they can automate their whatever the regulatory requirements in terms of invoicing are there,
And
right?
supplier
So
base.
yeah, supply extended supplier base, understanding the supplier risk, so managing supplier risk also, right?
Yeah.
So and then the whole supplier thing, I mean, in terms of supplier information management, their qualification or risk management, it's a completely different ball game, right? So the solution is so matured that you need to ramp up your processes to be able to utilize them, right? So just having the capability in a tool will not help unless you are able to produce and get that quality data into the system, then have people who can actually utilize it in time, right?
Yeah.
So
Uh,
unless you have a certain expertise with the people who understand how to interpret the data, I mean, the the tool makes it easy, right? You still need to have that training or the mindset of the people, because they before you kind of bring in the tool, they might be working in silos and only have information about from, let's say, A to B, and then they don't know what happens C to D, right? So I have
right.
no clue.
Yeah.
And then with this modern age, as I said, the event-based things, it becomes so critical to understand the end-to-end impact and then act accordingly, right? So
Yeah.
earlier things were not allowed to be end-to-end, like a person was not allowed to know the end-to-end thing because of security reasons, right? So what if the
Yeah.
person tries to creep into, right? So,
Yeah.
but modern day tools give you those controls so that uh, those things are not possible in terms of the security is ensured. But then, if you want to bring the best out of your people, right? So the roles are changing. They would own a piece more end to end now, and then take that responsibility, right? So
Yeah.
that's how roles and everything is evolving in the modern day.
Absolutely. When you said that, right? You can be managing a piece of the entire process, but when you have the end-to-end kind of visibility, at least in your head, you have the understanding, you understand the flow, then you contribute positively so much. When I see recently, I have been, we in my company, we have rolled out in last couple of years in two different regions, S4 and Ariba. When I can cite several instances where if you're kind of really limiting in your understanding, you are focused on this is what I know, and I am just focused on that. Then you impact other things negatively in so many ways. The testing goes bad, right? You are not thinking about from procurement to accounts payable. The moment you're done with goods receipt, then there is invoice, accounts payable, all the other kind of process starts. So if you are not looking into from an end-to-end perspective, things becomes really challenging. So
True,
absolutely.
true. So
I
that's because so this yeah. So I just wanted to add one point here is nowadays, like, so all the, even if you look at the people who report into CXOs, leave about CXOs, even the
Right.
people who report into CXOs, day in and out, the only job at their hand is to take a decision, make a decision, right? And so they cannot do that unless and until they have the end-to-end picture, even if they have to take an approval from somebody for a decision, right? So they themselves need to have an end-to-end picture. What is the impact that is going to have? And then probably at least engage that team or a person who is going to get impacted, right? So they
Yeah.
don't waste time in to and fro. So
Yeah.
that's the key. Yeah.
Absolutely. To follow up what you said, I wanted to check with you, on the Ariba offerings itself. One thing that stood out for me in last few years is the invoicing piece. Is it fair to say that at least the invoicing, when you look at buying an invoicing module, that the downstream, how we know it, the invoicing is like least preferred offering out of the kind of all the capabilities in the mix, because it has, we know that Ariba invoicing is not really when you compare it with invoicing processes on the ECC or S4 side, or some of the other kind of invoicing focused SaaS products, it's not that mature. Yes, it helps in the reconciliation and other things, but from an entire invoice to pay view, it's not that mature. So that's my personal understanding.
No, so yeah, I understand your question, and then certainly that can easily be a perception for any customer, right? Looking at the way companies have implemented this particular solution, right? So now it's a very matured solution, right?
Okay.
But the way invoicing for, let's say, for Ariba was designed, right? So obviously at the back of it, it had the two-way and three-way matching features, right? And the process that usually are followed, right?
Yeah.
But invoicing solution is primarily designed based on your control set, or let's say whatever the purchasing or the ordering feature that you have in Ariba, right? As well as the receiving features that you have, right? So it complements and it utilizes all that ordering and the receiving has to offer. Okay, the moment you separate that, right? Then you can get into that perception of what you just started your
Yeah.
question, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very obvious. So as I said, this is all event-based solution, right? So it is linked to an event, right? Just to say, like, if the way receiving works in Ariba, right, as to how receiving works in some other solutions, let's say even in ECC, it's very different, right? It is very different. Like, just to give you an example, like the moment you the purchase order is released, right? It is ordered, right, to the supplier. So you have draft receipts created
In
right?
Ariba.
And you do a partial receipt, right? So another draft of the remaining amount is available to you, or a draft is there, right? So those kind of things are there. So how is it the system able to do that? Because even at the receiving level, right? So it has accumulators concept. So think of it as a account bookkeeping at purchase order level, at receiving level, and the invoicing level, right? And then when you get an invoice, your master or reconciliation master is your IR. Okay. But it is so interlinked that even when you have some certain returns, right? So when you do a return, you actually do a negative receipt, right?
Negative receipt.
And then it reset. So it resets the accumulators at receiving level, at ordering level, right? Even at invoicing level, right? So then the system intelligently identifies what's possible, right, and what is an exception, right? So that right from the moment you punch in an invoice, right? At that level, it is taking care of everything from what was ordered till what you are getting billed for, right? So everything is interlinked there. So the moment you separate it out, right? So for other systems, since it is not event based and since it is not linked to accumulators, right? And then when you bring in, then such. So the only thing is, what happens is, if you take an Ariba system, right, a fully working Ariba system, you literally don't have to worry about any audit uh, issues that you might face. Okay. Even anticipation, because the system controls are so much in place. Obviously, where you have exceptions, you manage exceptions, but everything is that even you for auditors at max, you just have to just open it and show it, pull out a report and show it.
The history or report,
And then that history is not, so all systems keep history. Like even in SAP ECC, you can go and check somebody changed something and this was returned, right? But the level of control that system has forced, right, is completely different. In SAP, you'll have to build all those controls. Okay, even I mean, it might be very difficult to even imagine and build those because they are not. You don't have that same concept of accumulators at all levels of your documents. I mean, at least to the best of my knowledge, I am not sure any out of the box feature provides you that, right? So you can obviously build, but that comes with that customization or additional enhancements cost. And then I don't know, because this tool, like even Ariba has matured over last like 12, 15 years, right, in this space. And this was always there from the beginning. It has only like the features or the reporting capabilities and things like that, or certain decision making that has only improved over the time, right? And then there are additional benefits of how you manage that. But the basic essence of having accumulators right from your ordering to receiving to invoicing, and then I mean the key change in source to pay space or differentiation is like you can create a purchase order directly in ECC, right? In Ariba, out of the box, that's no feature like that, right? So whatever you create a requisition after approval gets converted into a purchase order, right? So if you have to do a change PR, you do a change PR process, right? So that's how it is taken care. So even the person who was the originator of the request is at least informed or might be pulled into an approval for any change that is going to be sent through as a change PO later, right? So it completes the circle.
Got it. Sorry.
Uh, uh, scheme of things, right? In the entire source to paper. So that's where the difference is. So obviously, when you take out only when you talk about invoicing, right? So even with invoicing, like I would like to explain a bit more on the invoicing piece as a standalone. If you look at it, right now, in Ariba, when you punch in a invoice and IR document is created automatically, right? So it's auto generated, right? So you might have a partial invoice, a partial IR is generated, right? Similarly, if there are no exceptions, a partial payment advice is generated. It's like it's an automated thing, right? But if you talk about SAP, right? So when you have an invoice, there is an invoice posting mechanism. So there are so many other things uh, that are done as a standard process because it is there in so many industries now, right? As an also as a solution or an a widely accepted practice over the years, right? Everybody is used to it, and then every like if you talk about AP team or even finance team, right? So they can maybe interrupt a particular process to do certain things differently, right? So it's a capability that this other system allows, but maybe from Ariba point of view, that is not an anticipated activity. What Ariba says, whatever you have to do, you have to pre-configure in me, right? So you pre-configure, pre-decide that particular things, and that's how I'll give you like the concept of a header level credit memo. Right? It's a very common thing when you talk about ECC and all. But Ariba would not allow you to do a header level credit memo if you're doing rest of the things at line level, right? It's a built-in control. Okay, so so this is actually a feature. It's a I mean, even when somebody is not thinking of that particular control, it is built in for you, right? So that tomorrow, in any case, you, from an audit perspective, there are no issues, right? So you could have at a very high level, let's say you did not have a right exception handling mechanism and things like that. That could happen in any process, but otherwise, unthought of any obvious issues are avoided upfront. Okay.
Got it.
So that is the benefit. Unless and until you get to realize that particular benefit, you will be in the perception of this particular question when you start, right? So not only you as a consultant, but it could be the customer, right, as well. But it has to be that's why, as I say, end-to-end thinking, what is the end-to-end impact that
That
matters most.
drives. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, makes sense. Makes sense. I think you touched upon the business network part, right? While talking about the capabilities, and especially at least my sense is post COVID, and since last, let's say, what has happened, COVID and Russia, Ukraine, and whatever going on, and currently, on the Israel, Palestine, the kind of instability that we see across, that has really, I would say, resulted in greater adoption of the supplier management suite of things, the SLP risk, and also expanding the network capabilities. Because the uncertainty that started with COVID, a lot of companies were kind of forced to look into their supplier base, build a new kind of supplier base, right? Different regions, different kind of tiers of supplier base, and so on. And similarly, on the supplier management side, how do you manage a risk? Can you do something upfront, right? You are not reacting, but you are kind of trying to prevent by acting upfront, so to speak. So my sense is the kind of importance of this supplier management module overall and the network has kind of just catapulted in that sense. What is your, do you see that? What is your sense?
Yeah, so the entire procurement space, wherever you go, right? So the most messiest part is the supplier data, right? So having the right set of or the most current and updated supplier data for any organization is a big challenge because it's a ground reality. Even the supplier organizations themselves are not capable of keeping their
Managing their own
end users
information.
updated, right? So it's so much changing. First is like if you talk about like established suppliers who are at like a corporate level or ERP level suppliers, right? For them, for managing and maintaining and updating their own data is a different thing. But when you talk about medium and small scale supply, right, which is a very large chunk, right, and then where common issues that we talk about whenever we speak to supply managers is the duplication of supply, right? Duplicate
Yeah.
supply data. In reality, if you see, right, so at ground level, it's it's almost impossible to achieve a unique supplier database. Okay, if you have a big supplier base. So that's where the business network kind of platforms, right, come in really handy, wherein they run some checks, right? So they do routine checks every 6 months. If a profile is not updated, gets outdated, and things like that are there, then you have paid subscription mechanisms wherein you can look at that, and then you always interact with people who are up to date and transacting on the network, and so it gives you options. Okay, but having said that, you can only uh, increase the percentage of your relevant supplier data even when you use this business network. The reason is like if you take any particular supplier practically, right, he would be very keen in working with your people till he gets the order, right? So if he is invited for an event or he wants to get a contract, right? So it's not the mentality issue, but when you are working with group of people, right? So if it is an individual, we can say somebody is doing well or not doing well, right? But if it
Mm.
is a group of people, you're bound to come across misses and things like that. But when you speak to a group of people who are in the upstream theme of things, right? When you're if you are a sourcing manager or a sourcing agent, right? The response that you get is very different from when you are, let's say, a production manager or somebody who is managing
Managing orders.
the downstream. Yeah. So even let's say if you are following up for an order, right? When you're following up for an order, maybe you'll have to call twice or thrice. But when you're calling up a supplier to participate in a bid, probably you'll get a faster response for a bit, right? So that's what. So that's how even the supplier organizations are working, right? So they want to maximize their order intake, and obviously whatever they have got, they'll come. So what happens is that supplier complexity or the supplier context complexity, not only at the organization level, but even at the context level. So when you're doing the source to contract piece, it's different when you come into the order to pay space, right? So so that supplier complexity of upstream and downstream has always been there, right? And that was the key selling point for Ariba, how it manages that supplier complexity, how you can get a supplier 360-degree view, right? How you can link a partition supplier to a common supplier and manage reporting and things like that, right? So that's the USP of when it comes to Ariba. But as I said, it's an issue of like it is an issue which can compound in itself, right? So if you have a minor issue, it when you have more transaction, it keeps on multiplying itself. So it's not a we probably at least in maybe next few years, I don't think we'll have a solution where we can get rid of that particular problem. We can only improve on the efficiency and the accuracy of that particular data, right? And the other thing is, I'm not sure if we have spoken about the supplier enablement piece as of now, right? So when we talk about supplier data, it's not only about their information, but now we're talking about like even though it's called a supplier enablement, but what I've seen at bigger organizations is where they succeed in this activity is that they do not take supplier enablement as an enablement activity, but they take it as a supplier empowerment. Okay. They won't call it as a supplier empowerment to their suppliers because then it could give a wrong message to them, right? Because they cannot show more keenness or they cannot show a different, what do you say, more than what they are actually responsible for in terms of responding to you, correct? So when the buying organization, without letting the suppliers know, work a strategy which is actually for their empowerment, right? Then your supplier enablement as well as the adoption of your new solutions from time to time, right? It improves and that engagement is fruitful. This is what I've seen, right? So the supplier, in the name of supplier engagement, you need to actually empower the supplier. So that's how will have. So it doesn't stop at just training about how the supplier provides the information or how he keeps it updated, or more than that, how he gets a channel of collaboration with your organization, or when, let's say, when you are bringing a particular supplier who's not already on a business network, you are helping him come to a business network. How do you sell that idea that was the record keeping that you will do for my organization is also going to help you to record keep the data of other organizations. It's a many to many this thing, right? Absolutely. So all those ideas have to be subtly sent to the supplier, and they really need a lot of hand holding. And then once they get that idea, probably they will be the people who will push you more, and they'll come and tell you things from other customers of their how they are helping their organization. Yeah. So those things, and then new avenues like you must have heard about this supply chain financing and things like that. Supplier financing tools and methods that are coming into picture, and then the benefit of getting a good supplier enablement is that you open up avenues like you can do a working capital management where you can give discounts to supplier for offer discounts to suppliers or ask for discounts to supplier if you do an early payment, right? So those things and a lot of uh, other opportunities in terms of how you
enable suppliers and engage
get
suppliers. Yeah.
So that's
I know I don't deny and absolutely agree with you on the benefit of running a successful, like you said, it's not enablement but empowerment. But I see that my what I have seen in the past many years, exactly the point you started. It's you when you consider it as a supplier enablement as an ad hoc activity, it's not a part of your entire project planning, and you do it last 2 3 months, right, before going live. Then you are running into a risk, right? You have not engaged with suppliers well before. They are not aware, so they are not prepared. When you are going to ask them about the right data, contact information, going to network, register themselves, my feel is exactly the points that you touched. If you are not considering it as a wider scope, if you are not considering as a key and strategic step in your overall program, and you are doing it in the last few weeks, then there is a greater risk. And when you do it upfront, you start really upfront and allocate resource, because I see in the supplier enablement side, there are very few people, and there is a thousands of suppliers literally, right? You need to deal with, but there will be a very small team that is asked to do that activity. So there is less resource, both human and capital. Then there are challenges, right? So that is also what I've seen. So yeah, thanks for bringing it up. So I was, my point was that yes, it is key, but I think what you have praised on is yes, the entire supplier engagement, enablement, and supplier management pieces. You need to look at end to end, right? So it's not
Mm.
just
So
starting.
yeah, and just to add to it, I think a certain experience of my one of my projects I can recollect, right? So you'll always find the number of people that are there in supply enablement less than what probably we would estimate are required, right? So that's a general assumption. But so it's not mainly the number of people in that team, but more of your strategy and plan. Because
Okay,
you'll have to do a supplier segmentation first, right? Not
absolutely.
everybody needs to know everything on day one,
No,
right?
that's right.
And
Yeah,
then when you are using these solutions, right? I think the toughest part, where the most of number of time is spent, is getting them into or signing them up. Okay, if the
yeah.
sign up is fine, right,
That's
and
the main
getting that
challenge.
initial few steps, right, and then you don't have to tell them anything. I mean, these systems are so user friendly. I mean, they give you a user experience, which means you don't have to actually tell them click here, click there, right? So the user experience will take care of it, right? So you just need to take them so far, right? And then, as I said, the supplier segmentation in terms of how you want to deal with them and who exactly is needed at what point. If you
Mm.
work that out, probably that issue of usually when we see that, oh, so many suppliers and we only have this kind of a team, right?
Got
So
it.
this size of a team, uh, yeah, more often than not, I think there are enough people, right? Because when they provide a certain number of people, when they really know a supplier base,
Right.
is either they have time at their hand, right? Or there is a certain way to go, and there will be a certain specific areas. I mean, there will be, let's say, 10 points that each and every supplier has to know, right? So there you figure out that strategy where with that minimum number of people, how do you make sure that these 10 steps reach each and every supplier? But for rest, let's say 40 actions that only a certain number of suppliers will have to take, and will have to take probably in next 3 months. And more often, you'll find that they like 50% of the days they don't need to know all those things on day one, right?
True.
And eventually, you can reach out to them, and there are different ways nowadays that people adopt to, right? So you have so many channels of communication. You can Uh, you can send them media files. You can communicate with them in different ways to provide the necessary training guides, and those
Mhm.
training guides are specific to the activity when it is required, right? So you just do not give like 30 recordings to a particular supply organization and just say, okay, your people have to go through this. That will not
No.
work, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you think through and if you segment your suppliers well, and then find out that minimum program, which is very short, very sweet, and then even the supplier is willing to, right, to spend that minimum amount of time so that he's kept interested. I think those things are very key and have to be done in the, yeah, as you said, those have to be planned right from, let's say, when you start your workshops for your uh, let's say for your business processes.
True.
That's from that point onwards, at least there should be a couple of brains thinking out, marking that out as to what needs to be done and how we are going to reach out to our suppliers and making sure that they are with us in the journey.
Absolutely. No, I think you made a very vital point. Segmentation, yes. As it has to be a part of your strategy. How do you segment, spend or supplier technical capability can be another criteria. So there are different criterias that based on which you can segment supplier and really kind of focus the communication based on their maturity level, right? So where they at and how do you want to kind of inform them, supplier summit, seminars, and so on. I think that is there for most companies. And then for large companies, the regional requirements, language becomes a critical factor. So yeah, thanks for bringing that. I wanted to check with you on your kind of career trajectory just to look at that because you started in SAP right in 2010, well before or maybe you started in Ariba in that sense, if I can call it, before it became part of the SAP kind of family. You worked in that company and you worked on the kind of product side of things. How do you see the product then, right? Back then and now, the kind of the changes that has happened in terms of overall kind of architecture, the capability. Just if you can summarize, briefly your experience
Sure,
back then
sure.
and now.
Mm. So when I started with Ariba, basically the on-premise customers were more. So Ariba also had on-premise solution, and then we used to have different solutions for integrating with different ERP software. So we had a different variant, we used to call them, for, let's say, for SAP, so Ariba solution that would integrate with SAP, or a different variant for a solution which would integrate with Oracle,
Mm.
or there was also JD Edwards and things like that. So a lot of PeopleSoft variants, right? So uh, the on-premise journey was very different, right? It was a lot of coding because it's a pure play. Like you can assume an Ariba on-premise solution as a very core Java perfect built uh, working solution, and then because you have Java and you can do enhancements on an on-premise solution, it became kind of an endless opportunity in terms of what you can and how much you can customize, right? So
Yeah.
there were certain customers who would customize Ariba to such an extent that when we logged into the system, it was difficult for us to understand that this is Ariba, right? So
Okay.
to that extent. And then those days, a famous troubleshooting tool was something called as Inspector. It was an utility where you could actually get access to your database very smartly, right?
Yeah.
You could write your own query, get the data, or you can write a query and overwrite the data into the database and things like that, right? So it was an interesting world, right? I myself have hands-on opportunity to install Ariba solution, right, on the on-premise versions, right? So it was also a kind of a skill to get your
For
Ariba
sure.
installation, getting it done and getting it ready, and to be able to log in a less
Right.
amount of time. Itself was a challenge at that time, but did that. I mean, we as Ariba consultant early days, we used to install that on our local computers, right, and have that. And then we could. There was the when I was part of Ariba support, I know the people in level 4 support team had different installations on their machines, so they could put a custom code from a customer, try to replicate the issue, and
Issues.
then
Wow.
suggest
Okay.
then suggest whether that fix is required, any kind of fix. And then we used to have those release priorities, and we used to recommend a hot fix or things like that for certain customers. So those were the days, and then eventually the focus shifted on when Ariba also started cloud hostings, right? So I was one of the so if you know, the cloud versions were popular earlier those days. Nowadays nobody looks at cloud versions, but there was a 10s2 release
Goodness.
for
Yeah.
contracts. So basically, a 10s2 release for Ariba on demand, and for contracts management, I was the release contact for them. So I remember doing some white paper on the DFS desktop file sync that
Right.
contracts management offers and things like that. So yeah, so started with those. So started with on-premise, then being the main primary support contact for many customers or crucial customers for on-demand solutions. Primarily started with contracts management and also sourcing,
Right.
analytics, and then when we had upstream customers going live with downstream as well. And there were suit integrations or suit integration related issues and things like that.
Correct.
So that's how got into entire source to contract scheme of things. And then when I left Ariba, the company, and joined other companies, I also had the opportunity, or the requirement was there to do some enhancements in terms of writing custom Java codes for on-premise customers. And then the next phase of things were that people from older version of on-premise, which was called Viking, and it had different names. And then 9R1, which was the last large number of customer use on-premise version, was also called Jupiter, which was later called
Interesting.
9R1 also, right?
Okay.
And then there were customers who would migrate from after migration from Viking to Jupiter, let's say, a lower version of on-premise to higher. Then there were customers who wanted to migrate from on-premise to on-demand.
Right.
And
Right.
then that's how the journey started. So I was part of a large US oil major company where we did that migration, core code migration. So customization and things like that would have to be retrofitted into new version or getting into the
Okay.
cloud solutions.
The
And
Slumberger,
one
is it Slumberger?
interesting thing, no, so Slumberger was already on the
Cloud.
they already started with the cloud solution.
Okay.
And Slumberger, so Slumberger basically, Slumberger was the place where I got into SAP or ERP side of things more. Because so my team, or as part of the design team, where we were doing outline agreement integration, so Ariba contracts to
S4 outline agreement.
ECC S4,
Backend,
right?
sorry, not S4, but
And
ECC at that point.
yeah, so ECC S4 both were there. So Slumberger was a big setup, multiple systems there.
ERP.
Like there was a staging system, and I mean a huge setup. We almost had, at one point, I remember, there were 1,000 SAP consultants, both, I mean, including support engineers and consultants, 1,000 people team working
Incredible.
for a greenfield project. So it was a very large IT transformation project. and taught me a lot. It was a great company to work with, right? So yeah, so that's where I got more into, started getting into the SAP scheme of things, and then I kind of, because I started with the integration motives, right? So I used to always dissect why this, why this, why this, and then got an understanding of from everything that has to come into or go out of Ariba and get into SAP. So kind of I understand the entire end-to-end stuff there and what are the impacts in different ways. And then I
Great.
also figured out how different the ERP system is, or what SAP is and what other tools Ariba, Vilas, or Concur are.
Got it. Interesting. You mentioned about integration. I wanted to pick your brain there. With CIG and the kind of transformation CIG itself has gone into, right, in last few years. My sense is with CIG being in place, it has really kind of simplified the kind of integration, at least between backend ECC or S4 and Ariba. And then for a fact that I think you know more than anyone, that CIG scope is now broadened into integrating with other kind of ERP solutions or even third-party systems. How do you see? Do you agree that CIG has really kind of impacted much more positively towards kind of Ariba adoption and kind of ensuring the integration side of things? Because integration even now, but it used to be a major kind of roadblock, so to speak. Not roadblock, but a major kind of point of concern, and a lot of time and resource allocation used to go there. But now, if I see, it has really kind of evolved, much more simplified. You don't need hardcore kind of technical expertise to do mappings and kind of transaction tracking and so on. How do you see the integration side of things when it comes to Ariba?
Sure, sure. Let me go back a bit, and I'll give you a background how CIG came into the picture, right? So
Okay, okay.
as I told you before, SAP acquired Ariba, we already had those variants concept where we used to have Ariba solution specific to be integrated with a SAP system or an Oracle system, PeopleSoft system, let's say, right? Uh, so things like that, right? So the concept of being able to integrate and easily integratable was already there, right? But when SAP came into picture and SAP acquired it, it wanted to make Ariba more of its own solution, right? So
Yeah.
these variant specific things, the development on that side was fast paced, right? And then it was because SAP was there and so many interesting developments were done very in a very aggressive manner, right? So, and then from the ERP side of things, we already had a concept of PI, okay, and then later it was called PIPO, which is process integration and process
Integration,
orchestration engine,
orchestration.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so PI was there, right? So Ariba, when Ariba integration started, they came up with the concept of CI, cloud integration, right? So CI releases were there. Well, basically at back of it, it was all PI only, right? So so it was like one layer on top of another to make it simpler, right?
Right.
In terms of integration. And they reached a point where CI9 kind of, as far as I remember, CI9 was the last CI or
Yeah.
the more promising, largely available use CI release, which was then converted into, it was called a CIG
CIG.
initial release. So what it did is basically, because there are so many ways to integrate two systems which are so different, right? Because they are so different, there are more than one ways to integrate
Integrate.
those in terms of processes or how the data flows and mappings. So, so I think it was always a good strategy of, instead of making everybody guess as to how to do this and that, right? So SAP came up with a standard approach of what are the basic minimum things that you don't have to do differently. Let's do it all customers do this way, right? So they use CIG, correct? Initially, they use CI9 and then they use CIG. CIG had a different name even before CIG got its name, right? So I forgot that. But yeah, so because this.
And now there is a different name, right?
Yeah. So now that's another different name. And then now on top of it, they want to make it like a kind of, let's say, I don't know, the landscape independent, or I mean, platform independent is not the right word for it. Like if you talk about CPI, right? So they want to make it like not only for SAP specific application, but any application that can basically give and take information, right? So you could use a CPI to build, right? But at the basically the basic because these are heterogeneous systems, right? There's only one way, standard way that SAP has figured out to interact for basic transactions and data exchange is through CIG. So even if you're using CPI basically as a pass-through, you'll have to use CIG there, right?
Mhm.
So that mechanism still exists. So that's the background. Now, coming to the point in terms of like most of the issues that are faced, uh, everything has to be blamed on the interface because it's like a wall where people are there on both sides of the wall, right? Blaming each other for anything that's not passing through. They might be correct in their own sweet world, but what basically CIG is saying that it's just giving you a path, correct? So it just gives you a structure, a path, and all. But one needs to understand one system, as I said initially, is an event based, logically connected. The other system has a completely different DNA, right? Which is more of a fact based, right? So I'm not sure if putting those into a fact based versus an event based is exactly correct. But I think at a broader level of understanding of
Mhm.
issues, why we face those issues is this. Because
Got it.
as then again, when it comes to, let's say, there's so many issues when it comes to, like, I know SAP ERP is known for its finance module to be very robust, right? Everything that SAP built around was finally to make sure that the finance module gets what it needs, right? The let's say that even if you have to talk about FICO or Simpin, right, as a solution, okay. So finally, everything has to end up well in that particular module for your business to succeed, right? And then the same thing for a event-based module, it has been well distributed right from, as I said, the accumulators at ordering level, at receiving level, your invoicing level, reconciliations and things like that. Even the payment accumulators are there, right? Even though
Right.
ultimate payment system is different, but what payment is needs to be done, or what is the final payment for a particular vendor is all decided in that system. But there are so many accumulators at different level. It's not the same here when you talk about. Now, what you are trying to do is you are trying to gather information from a source system. You're pushing it here, right? And it's fine as long as you don't tamper with it. But the moment you do a facts based change here, and then if you allow a fact based change here for not acknowledging or event related impact, right? You're going to get into issues. So
Yeah.
that is an
Yes.
expected thing, right?
Thank you. CLID integration. I now when you say that, and I in my mind CLID integration comes into play. You know, when you the kind of recommendation to user is start from Ariba if you want to do the revision changes. But if I go and S4 do manual changes directly, you are kind of breaking the sync between two systems.
Correct, correct,
So
correct.
completely makes sense.
So, so and then the it's just that the way SAP was built or is always maintained or looked at is a very different way as to these other tools, right? But when you go across tools, like SAP was always a penultimate system for anything. Anything coming into SAP after it comes SAP has to decide what it
Hmm.
will do with it, right? So that has been the norm. Okay, nothing wrong with it because that's how people have worked, right? So they want to rely on it. But when we are using modern day technologies, we'll have to look at those external systems who are the source of that information, and that ownership will always have to be left with them. Like just to give you another example, like when we had a situation where there was field glass in place, and field glass data or orders of field glass were routed as PRs and orders through Ariba and then finally getting into an S4 system, right?
Right.
But then how Ariba treated field glass is like anything that originated from field glass, whatever changes are required, you do it in field glass and then push it. I'm not going to allow you. Okay. So that
Okay.
exact behavior, I'm not trying to say, okay, Ariba is better in managing that, but I'm saying whenever you have a system which is outside of your core ERP, right? Then you'll have to at least respect the data that the source
Coming in.
system is creating, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
If you want a stable uh, system
End-to-end.
or a process landscape, a system landscape, and an integrated landscape to work fine, right? So
Yeah.
you respect that. The moment you break it, you are probably breaking the whole chain.
Got it. Thank you, Vilas. I think there's so many things that we can talk about, but with time constraint and everything, I wanted to ask you about the SAP career itself. You have been an active, practitioner in this space for now, what, 15 years or more, and you have done, like I said at the beginning, to introduce you, you have held different positions, different roles. You are an employee at some point in different companies, being a consultant or an lead manager, advisor, so to speak. Then you have help other companies build business in this space. Now you are running your own company. Do you have any kind of, I don't want to say advice, but your insights, how the career progression is happening in this space uh, for beginners, or for maybe you can break it two parts. How a beginner in this space should approach, look at or plan its career path, and for mature folks who are, let's say, in the 8 to 12 year space, right, who are in this SAP procurement source to pay space. Because right now I see the market is really transient. It's I don't see it a great market at this point. I don't know whether someone is planning to move jobs, take a kind of promotion, or move from a consultant to a leadership kind of role. How do you see these things evolving in terms of career changes for senior folks and also for beginners?
Hmm. Sure. So I think at any stage of your life, when you're, let's say, if you're planning to access this particular space, right? Uh, I think it would apply to any technology, not only SAP,
Okay.
but taking SAP as an example, right? So first understand and accept, okay, the state of what the market is, right? It's like SAP at one point, let's say, it was capable through its customers, partners, and whatever ecosystem we call, right? It was capable of, let's say, employing 100 people and giving them work that would make them satisfied. Okay, they would it would satisfy at least their personal goals,
Right.
professional goals first, and then at certain point, it also had, depending on the individual, their personal satisfaction out of their work, right? So now, I mean, from where I see, right, obviously, I do not have like very ground level insights into what the market situation, but depending on how we interact and what interactions we see, or the news that we read, or the experiences that our people in this space people share, I feel out of those 100, at least 60 people are struggling to prove their own position. Okay.
You're talking about
If they
senior
have
folks?
in top to bottom, at least 60% of the people are struggling to justify their position. Okay,
Okay.
top to bottom. I'm not only saying senior level. I think I'll tell you why it is top to bottom. So 60% in the sense, out of which some people have already faced the brunt where they are being laid off. I mean, I think there are more cases in Europe and US
Mm.
where people are being laid off as compared to, I think, India I mean, even in India, we have heard and we know people who are getting laid off. But it's a common problem. If you ask in any region, you'll find people will struggle if they have to justify their current position as to what role or designation they are assuming as to what they are actually able to offer. I'm not saying about their intent, but in terms of, is there really so much of work that one can do, right? And there could be different reasons for it, right? It's not necessarily that the knowledge is being lacking. Many times where I've seen that because the roles are defined in such a way that you can only do up to a certain thing, right? You cannot go beyond your this thing. Otherwise, you are treated as a. I mean, there are different ways of which the bureaucracy works, right? So, I mean, there are different level of bureaucracy here in, let's say, in India versus other countries, and there are different ways how people tackle it. But it's there everywhere, right? In different shapes and form. Right?
Yeah.
So, at least in Indian scheme of things, when I say India, it's not only or Asian subcontinent, you can say, right? Where there is a common way of thinking across levels, right? There, where you can only do only a certain level of work. Beyond that, you'll have to be ignorant of what is being done or being said, right? To protect your own position. So that is one kind of a barrier. Other barrier is since you have spent so many years doing certain thing, you don't want to get out of that because you think you've done enough, right? So it's for you to now getting it done from the new people. But the
Right.
problem with that is if you yourself have not done it, you will never be able to provide the basic necessities that a particular new generation
Beginner.
that is there that you're going to depend on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And since the things are changing so drastically and there's so many improvements already and so many permutations and combinations, as I said. So
Yeah.
at a high level, everything looks as a confusion or repetitiveness or redundancy. But if you have the clear knowledge, enough knowledge, you'll be able to distinguish. But when will you get that? As a as the experienced professional, you either don't want to learn new things or you're not getting enough opportunities apart from only a technical or theoretical knowledge base or a mechanism where you can attend a session but do nothing after that, right? So you'll not have enough control in your position as to you start something new for your organization. Very few organizations or only a small organization might be able to offer you that. Big organizations usually you do not get that chance because you already have certain responsibility that you have assumed, and there are other challenges and so many approvals required for anything that you want to do distinguish. So even if you are experienced or a new professional, you need a on-the-job KT. The only difference is on the job KT for a experienced person is that nobody else is required to probably tell him or guide him throughout the day. Okay. Or maybe he can figure it out on his own. Versus a new person who would need a hand holding maybe 8 times a day, right? For a certain things. But he can only but an experienced person can guide him 8 times a day. But experienced person cannot teach him 8 hours a day theoretically without having something that he can put his hands on. Right? And getting that is the biggest challenge. You're not you if you have that kind of a staff where you can train, you probably don't have that projects where you can get them hands on, right? Or if you're getting projects, right, you are so much occupied into the other governance issues that you are not able to utilize that particular opportunity to get people hands on, right? So it's a very self defeating time space where we are in, right? Where let's say you are smart enough to figure out something, and eventually when you master at it, you kill your own job, right? And then it's like traditionally wherever we have been, you had kind of a ladder kind of a thing, right? So ladder not only in terms of positions, but even in terms of knowledge. Okay, you gain something, and then you see next you have to do this, right? But nowadays the technology is such that you master something, next thing is not up or down. I mean, you don't know where it is, where you'll have to jump down or climb up. I mean, you'll not know. And then you cannot see that because it's so drastic. So I think as a fresher or even as a lateral person who wants to change technology, I am getting a lot of people who reach out to me. Oh, I want to do SAP certification. Maybe they're not in SAP space, but now they want to do a SAP certification and get into an SAP world, right? I said, I mean, see, there's so much saturation in this particular matter. So they see a lot of openings outside. Oh, SAP has so many openings, but they don't get to see there's so many people there to get those jobs. And people who are working on certain things, they're willing to take up more work, right? Who's already working is willing to take up more work, who's already certified, wants to do 4 more certification. Okay. So certifications have their own, we cannot say that certifications are not important. It's like having an educational degree, like having it doesn't guarantee you anything, but not having it could hamper you at certain stages, right? So if you're a beginner, and so certification is one way, but I don't think somebody should get into this particular space irrespective of their experience. Even let's say from within SAP space, he wants to get from one module into another because they feel there is more demand here and things like that. Just for that sake, get certified and hope that they'll get a job. I think it's like similar to uh, trying for repetitive entrance exams at higher levels, like for let's say UPSC and MPSC, how we do, right? Or
Yeah.
other examinations. So it's like that. So I'm not saying it's not for everybody, but for most of the times, I think it's very important that you preserve your energy, okay? And you only uh, spend that amount of energy where you are still energetic to try something new, right? If this does not work, you should always give your 100% in whatever you're doing, but you should not get into that so much that you're not now willing to do something else because that did not work, right?
Yeah.
So I think straight away getting into a certification, getting some tuitions and just do a certification and be ready to be employed is for somebody who is already having some source of income and withstand a long duration of time and try his luck, right? So it becomes a luck factor. Otherwise, I would suggest that you try out all your connects to a third degree, right? You know somebody, you get in touch with them and find out a few more contacts from that space. Probably from them, again, you get to another level of contact, right?
Yeah.
And then that's how you try out and see whether you have an option to get on the job, even if it is a shadow or anything. Maybe you don't get paid for a couple of months to do the shadow. That's even fine. That's even better for you paying for a certification upfront. You do on the job, and then probably if needed, you get certified, right? Or you
Yeah.
can do that parallelly when you see that certain opportunity is coming. So what I'm saying is give your 100%, but be always ready to be equally energized after maybe a break to try something else, right?
Yeah.
So it's not the time, not only in this space, in I think in every other aspect of life now, it has been such that things get outdated fast, right? And then opportunity is there for the taker. They say there's nothing called as deserving.
Right.
Anybody that is a taker. For that, you need to be at the right place. So that is also important. So
True.
try things out, give your 100%, but keep your energy levels high to try something else as well.
Fantastic. Yes. I think recently, earlier in the year, I interacted few people. I was doing a career management workshop for some of the senior folks, and I think some of the points that you said. I did a beginner session also in February. At least for beginners, I think you are not coming with baggage, right? If someone who has 10 years in the SAP space, that means that you are you have a strong identity, right? I'm a SAP consultant, I'm a senior consultant. I have done like 6 projects, 10 projects. Whereas for beginner, at least, you are not coming with this kind of identity, right? Strong sense of being. So you should be able to explore, right? If SAP space is not working out, maybe see other areas, right? There are so many other digital procurement tools, and they are trying to create an ecosystem of their own, like Coupa, Ivalua, and other spaces. Also look at the business roles, right? Beginner business roles. I think sourcing agent is something that you mentioned in your responses. Order agent. There are so many companies who have procurement service centers, right? So you do some kind of operational work. By then, you have at least access to system, right? You have access to system, and you are performing a piece of the business transactions, right? Entire end-to-end. So you get some knowledge, and then probably spend few years, couple of years, then see if still consulting appeals to you. Then see if you can make the transition. So yeah, really valid inputs. Thank you so much. I think we need to end at this point. Vilas, thanks so much for your time. This was great. I think we should speak more and probably plan some other session to discuss about various other topics around this source to pay space. But for today, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for giving this opportunity, and nice interacting with you.